let's move on now to our major discussion. In a bold move to increase revenue generation in the country, national revenue, the Nigerian government has raised the value added tax VAT from 7.5% to 12.5%, while this reform is aimed at boosting fiscal sustainability. It raises critical questions about its importance on businesses, households, and Nigeria's struggling economy. Don't forget that cost of living is already choking the living, and everyone is thinking of the way out. Joining us to break down the implications is a business expert, Benedict Ochiago. Thank you very much for being on the program this afternoon.
Thank you so much, DPO. It's been a while we did this together.
Thank you so much for being on the program. Now, help us make sense. What does the recent VAT increase to 12.5% means for the average Nigeria?
Well, it would have meant something very, very indifferent, but thanks to the Senate that the President proposed it, but the Senate has declined it at the moment, owing to the ground that the timing is wrong, which perhaps I want to believe that they are right in that regard, because when you are talking about value-added tax on citizens who are already bleeding, and then what is value-added tax? The value-added tax is tax that is gotten from consumption, your consuming power, your purchasing power. For example, you go to buy. When you buy, instead of taxing the person you are buying from, you that is the consumer, you are being taxed. That is the value-added tax. That is, as I am buying this commodity, this portion of the money goes to the federal government. This portion of the money goes to the federal government every time I am buying this particular commodity, except for the commodities that has an exempt. But for those that are not exempted, when you are buying, a portion of the money with which you are buying goes to the federal government. And then if the poor Nigerians, the already bleeding Nigerians, will be paying 12.5, eventually it was actually streamlined to 10%, but in all, whether 10 or 12, the Senate declined it that we should just leave it at 7.5. So on that, I give kudos to the Senate because the problem we have in Nigeria, it is not just about intentions, because the federal government is full of intentions, but the problem is execution. And then if, for example, tax bills and tax reforms are great, but again, we have to look at implementations before this time around. If 7.5% VAT, we have not even been able to implement it accurately. We have not even been able to give the dividends of that income to the citizens. And then now you are coming to say that we have to make it 10%, we have to make it 12.5%. On what ground?
So let's move on now.
All right.
How will this tax reform bill affect small and medium-sized enterprises?
Yeah, on paper, it will negatively impact, because according to the tax reform, if your business and is 50 million and below in terms of accumulation of trade, you will be exempted. And then if the asset of the business is around 250 million, also you will be exempted. On paper, it is supposed to tend towards the path of prosperity for the small and medium-scale enterprises. But however, the indices that drive businesses are holistic. The tax reform is just one of them. And that is not just what drives business. If you are asking me not to pay tax, I have to be in business, first of all, to pay tax. If what actually drives and consolidates small and medium-scale enterprises is conducive environment, it is a kind of grants and loans either from the government or the government agencies. So these are the things. There are not enough conducive environment to run business in Nigeria. Of course, you know that we have infrastructural deficit.
If you say we don't have conducive environment, to run businesses in Nigeria. What do you mean by that? Let's break
I'm
it
talking
down.
about first security, of course, that is not hidden. Then we'll talk about infrastructures. And then we talk about consumers protection, for example. And then we talk about price control. If you are in a business where you have to go to the market, maybe, for example, you are a small scale producer, for example, you go to the market to get raw material today to make production. And by the time you get there next week, the price has skyrocketed to about 100 or 200% increment. Then how do you explain that to me? How will I accept that the tax reform, that the fact that I am not paying tax is actually helping my business? That is not, the tax reform is, if all things being equal, that tax reform is supposed to help the small and medium scale enterprises. But there is a kind of disparity and instability in other indices and other factors that drives business growth. And then and the government seem not to be so much interested in curbing all other areas, because the state governments are only interested on what will come, because this tax reform is about take more from the rich and take less from the poor. And then again, there is also that of the VAT implementation, where the distribution is 60% to the state where it is being generated, and then it was distributed, and then there is this 15% to the federal government, which the federal government eventually reduced to 10%, and 65% to the state governments and all of that. So and then to the local government 30%. So all of those things are just to help the government distribute wealth to the organs of government.
So,
but okay.
Yeah, quickly, is this timely? Looking at what we are faced with in the country, is this process a welcome address, and is it timely?
All right. Yes, it is timely, because the nation is bleeding economically. Our GDP is fast, in reality, crushing down, even though there are a lot of paper flying here and there that we are growing in terms of GDP. And then again, of course, we are aware that the growth of GDP, it does not automatically relate to the standard of living of the citizens. There are indices that can be used to adjudge the GDP to have grown, but also that same indices does not relate to standard of living when you have to take stock of how the citizens are living. And then I think that, then again, if you are talking about tax reform, I think the problem Nigeria has is execution, implementation. In all honesty, the tax processes are not checkmated in Nigeria. There is no accountability. A lot of people evade tax and they go scot-free in it for 10, 20 years. A lot of people, because there are no standard technological establishment or technological setting that tracks these things. These are the things that the federal government should actually, okay, fine, on paper what this tax regime is supposed to be a great one. But if you don't have a technological setup that helps track every facet of this tax collection and make sure that it gets to the relevant agencies, which is the federal government or the state government as it were, then we will also be running around the cycles. And I think this is where the problem is. The analog state of getting revenues is obsolete in many parts of the world, but Nigerians are still embracing. For example, if you go to the United Arab Emirates, the oil, they have a technology that tracks every oil that is being refined in the country. They have technology that tracks every crude that is being explored from the exploration in
So
the
that means they can give accounts.
They have a technology. The screen gives an account of, look at how much oil was refined. Look at what the crude oil that we were able to exploit within the past 6 months, 3 months, and then every track with which it went through is being followed, and everyone that is involved is being tracked. to make sure that everything from the place of exploration to the purse of the government. And then if there is a diversion, there is a system that traces where and where the diversions went to. That is why you see the UAE being one of the most prosperous countries or regions in the world, because they have technological approach to these things. But for Nigeria, the Senate has passed the bill. But again, the law provides that the Senate should have an oversight function, because the Senate represents the people. They should have an oversight function that ensures that the tax regime is well implemented and well harnessed. But again, the problem of corruption. Individuals will not want the technological implementation to be enhanced, because it is when it is going from hand to hand that the corruption will be at the peak.
Let's head for a break now, Benedict. When we are back, we'll extend the front line of the discussion. We're going to be looking at other sector of the economy and how this will lead to a more prosperous Nigeria. That will be right after the break. Welcome back from that break. If you're just joining, it's Business This Week, reaching you live from ITV, reaching you from the ancient city of Benin Kingdom. Now, let's quickly move on now. How can we assess the efficiency of the collection and compliance in Nigeria? How do we balance this together?
All right. Now, how we would be able to really do this is the government needs to develop a very strong will. If you watch, when this tax reform bill came up from the presidency, there were a lot of antagonists. There were a lot of oppositions. But especially from the northern region at the beginning, when they didn't really understand the nitty-gritties and the content of the tax reform bill, until eventually it was explained and every path understood what it was. And the presidency developed a very strong will to make sure that this, despite the opposition, it went through. And thanks to the Senate that they also alluded to that fact. Now, haven't done that. The same will should also be translated into the implementation and the executions by setting up task force committee that, and then again, you cannot totally blame the president for this, because the president, his duty will be to set up the task force committee. The task force committee will be made up of Nigerians who are very prone to corruption. And then they will go there, instead of serving the nation, they serve their pocket. Nigeria is endemically corrupt. That is why when you want to blame it alone on the governor or on the president, I find it I find it difficult to totally agree, because the president will set up committees, set up task force, set up all kinds of things that comprises Nigerians. But the problem is that over the years, Nigerians has lost touch of true patriotism. And then you have people that are not patriotic in committees, lobbying for positions and everything. And then when they get there, it is about their pocket. It is about a kind of sabotaging the good intention of maybe the president and the governors and all of that. In fairness to the president and the governors. But again, I believe that when the president is out to track these things, he will be able to track it. And that is by setting task force and then setting technology in place. The former governor of Edo State did that with the revenue collection from buses and all of that at a point. I don't know whether that was sustained to the end of his regime. And I'm also aware that that is, at this current regime, is really a shadow of himself. Not much has been said about it. And then again, of course, you understand that a lot of individuals will want to frustrate that technological effort, because those that want to be billionaires and millionaires through the revenue collection will only achieve that when it is from hand to hand, when there is technology that is driving that. So I believe...
in other words, you're trying to say that it will be very difficult to kill corruption out of this new invention.
Yes, it will be very, very difficult, because the system that is fighting corruption are also corrupt. That is the problem. If, for example, the president can set a special task force that are made up of patriotic Nigerians that are ready to really ensure that this tax reform is adhered to. The things that drives other economies of the world is this tax regimes.
Payments, yeah.
There are a lot of countries, especially in Europe, that doesn't really have that resources the way we have. The only thing they do is that they are very meticulous about taxation, like Spain, Portugal, for example. They are very, very meticulous about taxation. They make sure that the tax regime is being followed to the letters. And then again, DPO, while I also blame companies and individuals, because this tax regime also covers there is the CIT part, that is the company taxation, and then there is this the PIT talking about the personal income tax and the company income tax. So now people will be more encouraged to pay tax when they know that the former one that was paid was actually used for the people.
So quickly, we have to start wrapping it up now. How can the government balance the revenue generation with economic growth and public welfare?
All right. Now, balancing it is not a rocket science, because that is why the government is there. The government is there to harness resources of the nation, or the state as it were, or the local government as it were. The government is there to harness resources. The government is there to be able to get tax from the people. Okay, this tax is simple, Praise. What is tax? Simply about, okay, the government gave me a conducive environment to do my business. They provided roads, they provided market, they provided water for me, and they provided security. And I was able to do my business to make profit. From the profit, I give this back to the government to enable them to do more. That's simply taxation. From the profits I was able to make, or okay, the government gave me a job, for example, and then from the salary I earn, that is the personal income tax. From the salary I earn, now this percentage, I give it back to the government to enable them create more job, and to enable them create more system that will give me conducive environment to continue to do my job. That is tax. So now when I pay that money to the government with that intention of, okay, to enable, and then by this time next year, I'm seeing that we are worse off than we were last year. It means that I've been wasting my time. So I believe that the government needs to do more by ensuring that this administration, the tax administration, is followed to the letter, not just about getting the tax, but about giving back the dividends of that money, of that taxation, to the people.
Okay, I think we would like to take that as your final submission. Not about taking the tax, but it's all about giving back the dividends back to the people. That is what it should be. And this is where we'll be drawing the curtain for today's edition. We hope to see you next week, Friday. On behalf of all of us, my name is Daniel Praise Osedebame.